Portman of Ohio. He sits on the Foreign Relations Committee. Senator, thanks for coming in.
Hey, Kate, you bet. Nice to be on with you again.
So you applauded the direct talks with North Korea. The president then, though, tweeting today that everyone can now feel safer. There's no longer a nuclear threat from North Korea. Do you believe that?
Well, it's a step in the right direction. And I have been promoting direct discussions with North Korea, in part because of my experience of trying to get Otto Warmbier, the young man from Ohio who finally came back, but in a vegetative state, and spent 18 months working on that. And it was very frustrating because we sort of couldn't break through to the right level to get answers, even as to his condition. And I do think that with regard to the nuclear weapons program also, it's important for us to have those direct and very, candid and tough negotiations. What will happen, we'll see. I mean, we need to be sure that whatever we see in terms of their commitments are verifiable, because in the past, as you know, what North Korea has done is entered into these negotiations as a way to stall the efforts of the international community to push back on their weapons program and the means to deliver it, the missile program. So, yeah, I think it's trust but verify, and I say trust, I mean, I'm skeptical because of the past. But it's a step in the right direction. Direct negotiations is good. At this level, of course, it's unprecedented. And I do think the communique was positive in the sense of North Korea making certain commitments. Now we got to see if they honor those.
Can you say with confidence, though, that there's no longer a nuclear threat from North Korea because of that communique?
Well, no, of course there's a nuclear threat from Iran, North Korea, other countries that have nuclear weapons and have shown, their irresponsibility in terms of their behavior. In the case of North Korea, of course, they also have human rights violations, and I raised the issue of Otto Warmbier, who I actually met with his parents at the airport in Cincinnati a year ago today when he came home in this horrible condition. So you need to be skeptical, Kate, but it's a step in the right direction. And I think it's a very positive development that North Korea is saying these things. Now let's be sure that these are verifiable and that they honor the commitments they've made.
One of the concrete things that was promised was that the U.S. would halt these military exercises with South Korea. The president said yesterday and again today that one of the reasons for doing that is that it will save a bunch of money. We'll save a fortune, is what he said. Is that the case?
Well, relative to not doing it, I suppose so. There needs to be training, so the training exercises would continue in some way. It wouldn't be war games with South Korea, it sounds like, at least in the short term. One thing I think is interesting, at least what I've been told, in terms of the commitment from the U.S. there, is it's a freeze. It's not a delay permanently. In other words, it's still on the sidelines, and if the commitments that North Korea has made are not kept, and they need to be verifiable, as we said earlier, then those war games would continue. So in a sense, it's the maximum pressure campaign, that part of it put on hold while we see whether they're serious. I think that's the right way to approach it. I'll be with Admiral Harris this afternoon, who's, as you know, the former commander for that region, for the Pacific region, and is now up for nomination as the ambassador to Korea. And I'll be talking to him about that because I think he has a very good perspective on this, and I'm frankly very pleased that he's being nominated for this job.
I'm interested to hear that perspective, so please share when you do speak with him. I want to ask you about tariffs. You're concerned about the escalating trade tensions with Canada and other allies. Senator Bob Corker, fellow Republican, of course, he wants to do something about it. He's trying to limit the president's ability to use this national security rationale to impose tariffs and go around Congress. He's not getting a vote on it, and he's not happy about it. Listen to this.
We might poke the bear. The president might get upset with us as United States senators if we vote on the Corker Amendment. Well, we'll do what we can do, but my gosh, if the president gets upset with us, then we might not be in the majority.
The point he's making is that you all are too scared to do what's right. Is that what's happening here, Senator?
Well, it's very complicated with trade, as you know, Kate. I'm the former U.S. trade representative, and so I've, been involved in some of these issues. In this particular case, of course, we have a situation where it's the national security bill called the National Defense Authorization Bill, and this is a revenue measure, so if it got put on there, the House would have the ability to send the bill back to us, and we have to start over because revenue measures have to begin in the House. So that's a process issue. But I think Bob Corker raises a good point with regard to the fact that the tariffs that are being imposed because of the use of this 232, which is for national security, aren't necessarily being used properly. In other words, I do think there's a national security issue with regard to our steel and aluminum industry. No question about it. I think China, in fact, is the problem. They had 15% of the world production 15 years ago. Now they have 50%. They don't need it. They're trying to dominate it. I'm convinced of that. And they do sell their product under cost and subsidized. And we don't want to drive out all the steel jobs. We've lost 1,500 jobs in my state of Ohio in the last few years alone. But having said that, you need to use the national security part of this in a very selective way where there really is a national security risk. And in some areas of steel, like electrical steel, we have a real problem. We have one manufacturer left. They say they're going out of business. We need it for our grid. We've had a 100% increase in imports. So that's the way you use it. But to use it in a broad-based way, as we have, for instance, with regard to Canada and Mexico and the EU, I think is a mistake. And I think it actually risks the World Trade Organization finally ruling on this issue in a way that would take away that authority. So I think there's a good point to be raised here substantively on trade. It's complicated, but the reality is that this is a very specialized tool that ought to be used in a very targeted way.
When there's a will, there's a way, Senator. At least I used to think that. Maybe not. I want to talk to you about elections, but we've run out of time, and I got some breaking news I got to get to. Thank you, Senator,
thanks, Kate.
always for
Always
coming on. I
good to be
really
with you.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Take care.
We have some breaking news coming in.